Jill, we last talked almost a year ago, and at that time you were still farming in an urban context, and
Yeah.
you talked about you were in the process of looking to move to a farmstead, homestead type situation.
Yeah.
That day has come and we're here. But before we get into that, for people who aren't familiar with who you are and what you do, can you talk a little bit about your farming background and your connection to the community there in terms of a farm?
Yes, I would love to do that. I just finished up my 5th season of my business, which is Loving Roots Urban Farm. It initially has been located in Ferguson in the northern part of St. Louis, Missouri, where I was renting, about a quarter acre. It was about a quarter acre spot. I call it 1/8 of an acre. I think that was more just the bed space. But I was renting this plot from a larger certified organic farm that allowed me to farm on their property. It was a great setup because I didn't have a lot of initial outlay, a lot of costs in the beginning, and so I was able to kinda hit the ground running and start my business with a lot of ease because of the support that I had there. I focus on quick growing crops, like small market gardener type of model, selling direct to consumer, have a wholesale side and a retail side, and absolutely love what I do. So along that process, I thought that I would like to farm on my own land and maybe not rent anymore. Initially, I thought that I wanted to continue to be in a very urban spot in the city of St. Louis. Well, luckily, I rethought that because really, as the years go by, I need less city and a little more rural type setting. So my partner and I looked for land for, oh gosh, a good 3, 4 years and finally found what we feel is like the perfect spot for both of us. And we're in the initial stages of moving the farm.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What was your is this really lifestyle driven?
Yeah.
That it's yeah, we're looking for something different, and it's also,
Yeah.
"I wanna own this so it can be ours, mine, and I
Yeah.
can build it over time."
Yeah, I think so. Honestly, like I look back and I was like, "Wow, I had it really sweet." Like, just the renting and the simplicity of, like, not having to build infrastructure and worry about what things would break on the farm and have someone else fix it that owned the farm, like, that was all really nice, but I think the larger picture that we were looking for was more what we're calling this farmstead, it's not just where I work, but it's where we live and grow and incorporate our environment into our passions. And so it just felt like a bigger dream. And I had the stepping stones by being able to rent land. I had the stepping stones towards, I think, the bigger dream. So yeah, more lifestyle, bigger picture, living on the property, full circle kind of thing rather than work here, play here, live there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome, and I think that's what a lot of us seek out
Yeah.
at different stages of life. I mean, I'm definitely there myself of, like,
Yeah.
I couldn't go back into a city and live under that
Yeah.
type of setting all the time. It's just too it's not that it's fast paced, it's just different when you're out a little
Mhm.
ways by
Yeah.
yourself and you can go outside and just chill.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
the unique thing about this situation I find for you is you have a functioning business, and
Mhm.
that's an income source for you.
Yeah.
It's located near your market.
Yes.
So it's not just physically like moving a house from one spot to the other, moving all our stuff,
Yeah.
but you're now moving the business. How does this move and how did you approach the thought process of the move of I want to move. I have this business that's functioning. It's a market garden. Where was the overlap there? Was it you're willing to let go of parts of the business on the new
Mm.
land? Is it okay if I'm further away from my
Mhm.
customer base? How did you think about that?
That's a really great question and also very pertinent because we initially were looking further out than where we landed. So the metropolitan area of St. Louis is very sprawling, and expansive. It even goes into the Illinois side, so it's not just Missouri, but it even goes over the river, and that's still considered St. Louis. So we were looking anywhere within an hour of St. Louis metropolitan area was kind of like our this is as far as we could comfortably go for me to continue to run my business somewhat with the same clientele and, like, the same marketing strategies, like, that was as far as we were going to go, and so we were looking at a very large circumference, okay? Well, we happened to find a place that sits 20 minutes east of the metropolitan area. So, the beauty of it is we're outside of that fast-paced or, city life, but we have the proximity is it's just it's amazing for us because all of the parts of my a lot of my business is going to change just based on, like, all the infrastructure and the land and everything, but what's going to stay the same and what gives me a foundation is that I don't have to let go of those clients and start over. I don't have to let go of those customers and start over and those restaurants and all that. So that gives me like a really solid foundation to keep growing. So I don't know if that answers your question, but we looked at a broader, maybe more rural, and then we ended up maybe more suburban.
Yeah, no, that is what I'm after and what I was curious about
Yeah.
'cause I could see this coming up in a lot of people's
Mhm.
situations.
Yep.
It's great to move and get what you want on a land, but
Yeah.
then in effect, you're starting over. I mean, if you had moved an hour away,
Uh-huh.
would you have to rebuild your client base and really change the farm model?
I think more so. I think more so, like, with the market garden kind of idea where you're bringing people salad mixes every week kinda thing, like, it really works when you're in the city or really close, but as you move further out, like, that rapid back and forth maybe doesn't make as much sense, so I think there were going to be more changes to the model, but where we ended up being situated is just, like, it feels prime to me, where I can still go right back to the same I'm gonna utilize a lot of the same marketing that I had in the city and then just continue to grow it maybe in my secondary area now. And what's really cool is I can say now I'm a farmer that sells in 2 states instead of 1 because 'cause I'm sitting on right here at both states, so
Yeah, that's awesome. For the style of farming you're gonna do, are you
Mhm.
gonna carbon copy how you were farming on that quarter-eighth of an
Mhm.
acre to what you're doing now?
Yeah, I'm playing with that idea. I think I would like to keep a lot of that those same crops. But I will be growing on a little bit more land, so I do have more beds. I put up a 110-foot caterpillar tunnel that I didn't have before. So I'm definitely looking at expanding. I will focus on the quick growing crops, but now I feel like I can also have a little bit more fun and wiggle room with things that I want to try, like flowers or some other specialty vegetables. So some, yes, carbon copy, and then expansion on top of that.
'Cause if I remember correctly, you were at a good place with the business in terms of the
Mhm.
balance of
Yeah,
hours put into it,
yeah.
income put out of into it. So this wasn't a move that was, "We have to grow because we have to make more money, so we have to
Mhm.
move," right?
No, not at all. I absolutely loved everything about my business, so that was a little challenging, like, I mean, I'm still having kind of good buys on the rental property, and, everything was going so well, and we had an amazing relationship, and we'll continue to cultivate that. The money that I was bringing in on the small plot was really amazing, and so, no, it wasn't like this pressure, like, I have to get bigger and do more. It wasn't that at all. It was just more that goes back to that original question of the lifestyle. And, I want to work a little bit more with some perennial crops. And so now we have more space around us to play a little bit more.
How do you balance building a farm while having an established farm business. I
Yeah.
just know from talking to so many of you guys
Yeah.
that the work that goes into setting it up is huge.
It is.
And you have customers, clients who want product. So this
Mhm.
isn't a startup thing where you can scale at your own pace. How
Right.
are you dealing with this?
Yeah, this is like I'm at the brink of that right now. I mean, luckily, we found this property and home. Our home is on the property. We found it and moved in June of 2024. So we've been here half a year. So right when we moved here, I mean, I'm already orchestrating moving the farm as I was running the other small farm, piece by piece, piece by piece. I've just been implementing things, and then I had the winter. So my other small farm, I usually close it up the beginning of November and I take the winter off. So that winter off has become my time to talk to all the contractors, put up the tunnel. We just dug a pond. So I'm trying to get everything in order to actually have a season in 2025. I've decided I'm not pushing myself to start planting at the beginning of March like I normally do. I just don't think everything's going to be ready. And we can talk a little bit more about my obstacles if you'd like to. But so, because of the timeline, I've been able to finish out my 2024 season while starting on this new property slowly and then taking the winter to keep moving along. And I'm going to use the first few months of 2025 to keep pushing along. And I hope to be planting sometime this spring. For me, I'm thinking that my season won't be that much shorter because now I'm gonna try to do some winter growing, at least go deeper into, December, into just as far as I can. So I might have a little bit more on the back end, which will kinda make up for, something lost on the front end. As far as losing customers, I think about that. Now, I won't lose my retail customers. They are diehard. So whenever I have those vegetables ready, they're ready. Like, they're so supportive of me, and they know that my timeline is probably gonna be a little tricky this year. My concerns about the wholesale are a little, I guess it's more concerning, like, with the restaurants that I sell to, but they also are just they're really solid, and they love my product, and I think if I come in a month or 2 late, like, I don't foresee that there'll be, like, restaurants dropping me because of that, but I am kind of speculating and thinking that I'll be talking to the chefs soon just to kind of keep giving them a heads up that my timeline will probably shift a little bit later. I specialize in summer greens, so my thought is if I miss that spring, like if they have to go to someone else for the spring, well, most people grow greens in the spring, so okay, but nobody grows greens in the summer, and that's kinda my thing. So if I can get those greens ready for the summer and then come in at that time, I think I will still capture those same customers because 'cause I'll be the one with the greens. So that's what I'm hoping for.
Right. Have you
Mhm.
brought them with you on your journey per se, letting
Yes.
customers know in advance, "Hey, we're moving."
So much so. Everyone's following me on Instagram, and I just raised all the money to purchase my deer fence through my customers by sending out some emails, and everyone sent me money, which was so nice, and just
What was that
everyone's
what was that
yeah,
ask out of curiosity? Because I think
yeah.
that's a tool
Mhm.
that people can use
Yes,
when you're so localized D2C, you build these intrinsic relationship, it's face to face,
yeah.
and there's a lot of support there that often extends beyond a product exchange. I'm
Mhm.
not they're not just necessarily buying from Jill because they want the lettuce. They wanna support you and what you're doing. So, when you had that project you wanted to fund, what's an email sound like?
It's really honed in on the ask. So it's not I've had a background in marketing too, but it's like it's not just, "Hey, I need money, will you give it to me?" It's like, "This is my need. This is what's going on in my life. this is one of my obstacles, and this is my ask of you for this specific obstacle. Because people love to get behind, like, I know that I helped purchase that fence, not just like, oh, I'm sending you money towards, I don't know what it is. So it's like a really, for me, it's been a really specific ask, with some, some silliness around it too and some humor, and giving them easy ways to send you money. But I think being specific is really important. Yeah, and you're very, very right about the relationship. We talked about this in our first podcast, is that my farming business is so much built on relationships, and even call it relationship farming sometimes. Like I'm fostering relationships and growing food for people. And so people wanted to support that fence because they knew it was also going to support me and my life and the farm. So, I felt confident in asking for something like that, and yeah, and I the money still comes in. These people are amazing.
Yeah, it's awesome just
Yeah,
to hear that
yeah,
because I think we all talk about the relationships that farmers build and the love for local and that, and then you hear
yeah.
stories like this and like, it's not just all a myth or somebody saying it.
No, it's not. Yeah, and it's nice because, I mean, right now, I'll be really honest, I'm a little bogged down today around, I was doing some research on, like, small loans and business loans and loans for women farmers and beginning farmers and all this stuff, because I'm looking at how much I have saved and, like, how much I'm projecting that I'm still gonna need to make this project happen, and I might be a little short, so I'm like, "Okay, where's this how's this gonna happen?" And so I've been, like, looking at small scale, business loans and things, and, like, it's just it kinda bogs you down, all the details and requirements and, like, which one's gonna be best and all this stuff. And so to know that, like, there's still a good avenue of just asking people for what you need is a little bit of a relief. Not
Yeah, no strings
yeah.
attached, right?
Yeah, it's like, "Thank you for just loving me." And, like,
Yeah.
"Thank you for being generous?" And so I took the time and I sat down and wrote every single person that sent me money a personal note, and that's just goes back to that relationship farming. It just keep fostering, like, those ties to each other, and I think that's super important.
It's huge, yeah, it's probably
Yeah.
one of the single biggest pieces of advice I could give any micro business owner,
Yes.
regardless of farming or not,
Yeah.
is when you get customers, identify the ones that are loyal diehards and do
Right. Right.
everything you can
Yeah.
to help them, and
Right.
often it bounces back to you in your times of need, and I've
So
seen
much.
that personally.
Yeah. It's kind of the 80/20 rule. I think, like, 20% of the customers they're gonna be the ones that respond to that email and send that money, and they're the diehards, like, they're gonna show up, and then there's 80% that, of course, support it and love to get the email and everything, but they're not gonna punch the buy button or the pay button. But those 20% are, and you keep just fostering those relationships.
Yeah, I think there's a contingent of the population that wants to they have money,
Mhm.
enough money where
Yeah.
smaller things aren't necessarily as much of a consideration,
Yeah.
and they wanna do something with that money that makes them feel good, that
Mhm.
echoes their beliefs,
Right.
that supports their values. And
Mhm.
sure, you can give to larger organizations, there's nothing wrong with that, but often that's like selling food into the larger system. You don't see where it ends up, where if I give
Right.
money to Jill,
Yeah.
I know who she is. I get to see exactly what she did with that money
Yeah.
and all that and
Right.
interact, and I think
Yeah.
that people want that, or a certain part of people in the population want that. They're out there, and I've heard it from a lot of farmers. You get
Yeah.
these, what do you guardian angel type customers that just
Yes.
look
Yes.
out for you.
Yes, and it's worth a ask. You have nothing to lose, if you ask.
Yeah, right? If you don't ask, you don't get it, and it's amazing how many people don't ask. That's not to say you should ask all the time. But in times of
Right, right.
need,
Yeah,
there's kindness out there,
of
but you have
course.
to let it be known that you're looking for it
Right.
to get it.
Uh-huh. I'll give one more tip because you asked about, like, what does that email look like? So it's like a specific need, where you're at in the process, and then also, I think tying it to, like, some good news is always great. So, like, for instance, my email was that I announced that I was going to continue my online store this coming season. I was considering switching to a CSA and, like, not having this online store where people can just order whatever they want. And a lot of my customers were very concerned about that, and they really expressed it to me. So I thought about it over the winter and I was like, a CSA is not the right thing for me right now. I have too many moving targets and variables and everything. So in that ask email for the deer fence, I also announced I wanted you to know that I'm keeping the online store this coming season. So because of that, many of them were like, "Yes, we get to keep ordering. Here's your money for the deer fence." So it was like it was reassurance that they were going to continue to be a customer. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I it gives people details and it adds to the story, the depth of it. For one thing I'm curious on is I wanna get into the land. So for that part of it, how how much land do you have to farm on now? So not the total property, but
Right.
let's say you could max out farm production of the style that we're talking about. I'm not saying
Uh-huh.
shove trees somewhere, but
Yeah.
if you had a market garden, how much more land do you have now?
Well, I took out some trees to make an available spot ready to go. And that is I mean, it's a little over a third of an acre. Yeah, I would say a third of an acre, on a spot that's flat and ready to go. Now,
Okay.
there's maybe some other spots, but we would have to do taking down big trees and things like that. But this spot is just open, flat, and ready to go,
So
which is it
slightly bigger than what you had, not
slightly
crazy big.
bigger.
Okay.
And really, that's all I've ever a third of an acre was kind of my goal because I like relating to the first podcast, like I'm not looking for employees. I'm not looking to grow my business a lot bigger. So I want to be able to manage this plot on my own with maybe a couple volunteers. And a third of an acre feels about like probably my max
Yeah.
for me to do on my own.
One thing I am curious on now, there's a lot of new people who want to start a market farm, and they're coming into farming with virtual knowledge, stuff they've heard on podcasts, read in books, seen on YouTube.
Mhm.
You have 5 seasons plus
But
farming,
yeah.
so you have experience. When you approach you're basically setting up a new farm from scratch because there wasn't one there.
Mm-mm.
So when you started to set up the new farm, I'm
Mhm.
curious if I was somebody who's never set up a farm, here's
Mhm.
you having ran a farm, setting up a new farm. What are the what are some points that you really wanted to prioritize on the new setup that solved problems at your old farm? Is there anything
Mm.
that comes to mind? Like, "Oh,
Mm.
I never liked how this was. Now
Mhm.
I have the chance to do it from scratch.
Mm.
I'm gonna make
Yeah.
it this way."
Okay. Yeah, sure. I didn't feel like I had a lot of problems because there's already a farm. It's already a large organic farm, and they're very much into the market gardening type of farming, and so I had a great palette to work with, but some things that come to mind are simple things like I am widening my beds. So I always went with the 30-inch kind of standard market garden bed width, but I am going to a 36-inch bed. I would just like to utilize the space that I have a little bit more, and I can get a lot more growing space if I go 36 inches instead of 30. What else would solve the problems? Oh, well, I put up a very large caterpillar tunnel, 110 feet, which I think will be great, which is providing protection and being able to grow, earlier and later. Mainly protection is what I'm looking for, but I would like to get into some more cold hardy greens and tap into a little bit of the need in the area for like winter greens. So putting up the tunnel. Well, I have some new obstacles here that I didn't have with the last one, so that's where my mind is going. Not so much solving old problems, but the new ones
Yeah,
that I have.
what are those
Yeah.
challenges that you're now having to
Well, I have a very large challenge, and it's what has slowed down the entire getting the farm ready to go for the season is water, irrigation. So, at my previous farm, we were using city water, municipal water, and it's pretty good water in St. Louis. And so I was just expecting to use city water out of the new village that I moved into. Well, come to find out, which I didn't know this until weeks after we moved in, that they put softening agents in the city water. So we don't have a choice. The water comes through with, sodium, different types of sodium that will soften the water. So that in and of itself created a 5-month research project of how I was going to either get the salts out of the water or come up with a new water solution. So we dug a pond and we are capturing our own water off of our roof of our house and then also just the rainwater into the pond. It is a very large expense and it comes with a lot of obstacles because our soil is pretty permeable here. And so we don't even know if the pond's going to hold the water. Is the dam going to be secure enough? Like, I mean, there's multiple things that come with using a pond for irrigation. But I think in the end, like, we're gonna figure it out and it's gonna be great because now we have a water feature on our property, which is something that we were wanting. That's been, like, the largest obstacle so far.
what if you had to use that city water? Is it hard? Is it soft enough, meaning enough stuff has been added where you think it would really create issues growing?
Yes, so I talked to a soil and water specialist at a lab, actually at Logan Lab, which, like, a lot of us send our soil tests there, and I had them do a water test as well. And the agronomist wrote me back and said, especially with like if you're growing leafy greens, your plants will start to fail just even after a few rounds of irrigation because of the high amount of insoluble salts that were showing up in the water. So imagine like just spraying salt water on leafy greens, especially in the heat. So think about summer greens, delicate, or summer heat, humidity, delicate greens, and then throwing salt on them every day. Not a good equation. And so I wasn't willing to take that risk and just set up an irrigation system without doing all the research on like how that my farm could possibly fail because of this salt water. So yeah, I definitely did the research on that, and I guess people in the area are using that water on their gardens and stuff, but, like, I wasn't willing to take a commercial risk, like, risking my business, you know?
Is
So
there
I
any way to
wanted to set
undo
it up.
that?
What's that?
Oh, sorry. Is there any way to undo that in your research to unsoften it?
Right, so the only way there are 2 ways to get salt out of water in a system. One would be reverse osmosis, and the other one is called deionization. I went down both of those routes with multiple companies, and I got to a point where I said, "This is 1, too complicated, and 2, way too expensive."
Yeah.
It just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and I mean, on, like, a third-acre farm, I would estimate it was gonna end up being, $20,000 for the system, plus every year another $1,000 to flush it, like and then also doing the research on reverse osmosis, you're basically taking everything out of the water, everything. So you're left with no minerals,
Yeah.
things that plants need. And so then I'm back to like, okay, I don't want void water either. Then you're gonna have to add something back to the water. And it just became so complicated. And I kind of just stepped back and like went back to like permaculture design and permaculture methods and like what would nature want in this situation? And I think it's rainwater, you know? And So I went down the avenue of like, how could I capture water and hold it in a tank? You know, you think of like the rain barrel systems and everything. Well, those aren't large enough for a farm. I did all the calculations and I would need like a 50,000 gallon tank or something to get me through like a few months at a time. Well, where are you going to put a 50,000 gallon tank on your property? I mean, and then the costs and all these things. And then come back to like, okay, let's dig a pond to hold our own water and then irrigate from there, which is definitely something that's done in farming. You know, I
It's
mean, this
probably a
isn't,
pretty big pond then, right?
it's a pretty big pond. I don't know the exact calculation on, like, how many gallons we'll be able to hold, but I think it's around, like, 200,000 gallons, let's say. If it's full, you know?
Is is a well, was that not an option?
It was. So I went down the well route. I had a drilling company come out, and they did specs on other wells in the area and our property and my needs, and they thought that it was possible that we would not have enough water. I was surprised because a lot of farmers use a lot more water than I do, but I guess it had something to do with the water table, and I'm not sure exactly all the
Yeah.
calculations, but he was concerned about those hot, dry months. Those hot, dry months where I need the most water if you're doing greens and things, and he just there was there was a concern, and so I thought, "I don't think that's the way to go." Yeah.
Yeah, so this definitely brings a challenge, not just now, but this full
Mhm.
first year will be a learning
Yeah.
curve on the
Yeah.
pond. How's it holding? How's the water
Right.
holding up throughout the season? How do we get the
Right.
water there? All that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it could literally stop my season if the pond doesn't hold water. Like, we decided to step back and observe for a couple months. You know, we got it dug and then winter came, and so, like, we had a couple of rains and we had a big snow. But it's been hard to tell so far if the water's just gonna hold or if it's gonna seep through, and so but it's like we don't wanna start throwing Band-Aids at it until we have more data, you know, because, like, lining a pond is very expensive and hard to do, and, like, it's just, like, until you observe something, it's really hard to know what you're trying to fix, you know? So, it's a process, it's gonna be a process, this pond is for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
If you didn't have this water issue,
Mhm.
would it be mostly clear sailing?
I think so, yeah, yeah. The plot is, like, I'm doing a deep mulch system, I already have 6 inches of mulch on all the beds, I've got the tunnel up, and, I mean, I think, like, whatever is left to do there could be done in a month and ready to go. The wash pack processing room is getting ready to go under renovation, you know, that'll take, like, a month. So I think, like, the pond is the really large question mark, and it's also vital to the farm. It's the life force of the farm, the soil and the water, you know? Yeah.
If you look at moving the farm, what are you're talking about getting loans. What are your top tier things you'd love to have on the new farm? I don't mean like micro equipment, but in
Mm,
terms of like
yeah,
the bigger things
yeah,
that you think are really important given your farming style, that
mhm,
you're confident they work given past experience. Cat tunnel is one you mentioned because
yeah,
that gives you season extension. Obviously, crop protection is valuable throughout the year, not
yeah,
just extending the season. So that was one thing you thought was worthwhile. What
yes,
else are you looking at is these are the things I consider must-haves on a
yeah,
farm.
yeah. Deer fence, I mentioned that. We have a lot of deer pressure here, not just deer, but turkey and gophers and groundhogs, and I mean, a lot of wildlife on our property, so the deer fence, which will go up soon. The wash pack processing refrigeration building is a must. Luckily, I already have a detached garage on the property. It just needs, it needs a more electric, it needs water run to it, it needs a refrigeration unit, like, it needs more things to get it ready to go, but at least I have a structure that's there to work with. It will be my largest expense, though, just because having to run electric and water and redo concrete and all this. Like, it's the one project that's probably going to put me into the loan territory. Other like, where I'll do my starts, my plant starts, I have decided to use an extra room in the house for that instead of a greenhouse. I think with the way that our property is set up, I think that I'm kind of maxing out the full sun area, and I think that shoving a greenhouse somewhere probably wouldn't be the best thing. And so I have an extra room that I'm going to be putting like grow lights and tables and things inside, and at least trying that for year one. So that's very important. And then other than that, I would say just uh,
Is there anything you're strategically avoiding? Maybe things that are common on farms that you've accepted, "I don't need this, it's not an advantage
oh
for."
yeah, yeah, that's a good question because I'm in Ben Hartman's master class and all about the lean farming, and so there's actually a little greenhouse on the property. I don't like, I think it's more of just like a hobby greenhouse, but I've just been observing it and I'm like, there's no way that that's gonna get enough sun, like, for plant starts. So I've decided to turn that into a shed instead of, like, buying another shed and finding a place for it. I'm gonna try to utilize this little greenhouse as a shed. I'll probably pull some shade cloth on it just to protect things inside, but instead of, like, buying more structures, just trying to utilize what's already on the property in creative ways. What else? Yeah, not getting a commercial greenhouse, just having some grow lights inside. Hmm.
For the loan, how do you
Uh-huh.
view that as part of the business? Do you
Yeah.
different people have different views on debt,
Mhm.
depending on where they're at.
Yeah.
You're obviously confident in the business and where it's going long term, so you view this as, you obviously need a wash pack. You're not gonna turn
Yeah.
that down, and if you bare bones it too much,
Yeah.
it makes life difficult in other ways. So you have to have that. You
Mhm.
build it, you take out some debt to it, and this is just like a strategic investment in the future of the farm and where we're going.
Yeah, and, I'm adding up the numbers every day saying, "Is this gonna work?" And I'm like, I have enough money saved where, like, I might be able to slide by, but just in case, because, everything's triple the amount you think it's going to be, like, I'm just already, like, prepping, looking for small business loans, like, looking for avenues, like, just in case at the end I just can't swing it, you know? It's definitely not something I want to do. I had this conversation with my fiancé on Sunday, like, I'm a no debt person. I don't wanna like, I don't wanna owe you anything, nothing. I want all just clear, and I've always been that way. I've been saving money for 20 something years to actually do this project. Like, I don't wanna take out loans. I don't wanna take pay 10% on small business loans. So, I hadn't even considered it until this week, to be honest, and just, like, looking at these numbers, and I'm like, "I might need just a little bit more." So, my goal is, like, the smallest loan I can get. I mean, even if I have to, I'm like $10,000. Like, I'm not talking a lot of money, just,
Yeah,
like, there might just be, like, a little bit at the end that I just can't swing. And so I'm just learning about it right now. I would love to be able to get grants and things for these projects, but it has been challenging to even, like, locate grants, specifically for, like, startup stuff, like, like, I need this to start to make my business work. Well, we won't give you that until this. It's just like there's so many stipulations and, like, I just get bogged down, you know? I'd rather just spend my money, not go into debt, and not have to rely on government loans and grants and all of that because, like, when you're the only person running the show, like, I don't have time to sit here on the internet and, like, look at all the possibilities and get overloaded with all the information, you know? It's like a full-time job. I don't really wanna have to take out any loans, and I'm super grateful that people helped me buy my fence and that I've had enough money saved to mainly do this project, but it's been, like, lifelong savings, you know? So I know this is not easy for most people. Like,
That's a good lesson on why you save. I mean, this is exactly why
mhm,
you save when you're young to
yeah,
take advantage of these types of opportunities when
yeah.
you're older.
I'm really glad that I did. And I do know that those 5 years that I farmed on the rental property, because I didn't have a lot of startup costs, I was able to save money throughout those 5 years as well. So I'm really grateful for that. And I think I'm gonna be able to do it. I think I'm gonna be able to do it, but there might just be a little bit where I'm gonna need to get just like a simple loan.
Given it's the first year,
Mhm.
there's some unknown of just growing on the property. You have the obviously experience, but you haven't grown there. You have the infrastructure that's moving forward, but it's still, stuff goes wrong, stuff doesn't go on schedule. You
Yeah,
have the potential water unknown.
yeah.
Are you nervous about
Mhm.
the inability to produce income off the farm this year?
I am very much, yes. I am very concerned. I mean, I'm even starting with a completely new growing system. I'm planting into leaf compost, and I've never done that before. But I just figured this is how I wanna do my farm, and I'm gonna go for it. I did enough research. It's like I don't know, I'm kind of like a go-getter, and I do a lot of research, and I talk to a lot of people, and then I just make it happen.
Yeah.
And so I have a lot of variables, a lot of unknowns, and I am concerned about pulling in income. I am very much. Luckily, I have, another income earning person in my household, and this is an ongoing conversation about, like, if the farm can't bring in money or doesn't bring in money this year, like, it's an ongoing conversation for sure. And I have faith that it's all gonna work out, but it is stressful. It's very stressful. Yeah.
I think
Mhm.
that's the hardest part about
Yeah.
being a business owner of the unknown around income. That's
Yep.
been definitely the hardest part for me. You get to slow periods or down periods, and you start kind of bank account watching more than you would
Oh, yeah.
want to, and you
Yeah.
project and you start, like, playing the what if game, and I don't think it's healthy, but it's hard not to do, and when it's around money and people are going to wanna get paid for bills,
Yeah.
how are you gonna pay those? And you think ahead, so that's tough. How
Yeah.
far are you from your old farm?
30 minutes,
30 minutes.
30 minutes. And I already know the question you're gonna ask.
Yeah, is it a clean cut? Like, I'm
I
out of the
already know.
grade and I've jumped?
I made the clean cut decision.
Yeah.
I did that. Every day, though, I do consider, do I do one more season there? And they would love for me to. And I could see how that would ensure an income, but I also am so much about work-life balance, as you know from our first podcast. I just feel like I would just be spread out everywhere, and I think that it would make this process of starting the new farm or, moving the farm even longer and more laborious than if I'm here dedicated to this project. And so I made that decision to say this is my last season here, but it was not an easy one. Yeah.
Yeah. And it sounds like you made it from at least a sound mind. You're obviously somebody who looks at the numbers. If you have
Oh, yeah.
another income stream
Yes.
in the household, that helps into the
Yes.
decision. It's not, let's just go."
No, no, that was a very sound decision, and if there wasn't another income stream, it would have been a different decision. I would have had to kept going while trying to start this. Yeah.
And this is the classic entrepreneur decision who
Mhm.
has a regular job, starts a side hustle looks promising,
Mhm.
and it's this trade-off. Do you drop,
Yeah.
I don't wanna say guaranteed, but mostly guaranteed income
Yeah.
to pursue this other thing?
I
And
know.
you're trading that guaranteed income for time availability, and
Right,
that's, I think
right.
we've all done that at some point in our
Yeah,
career, and that's the choice you had to make here of,
yeah,
yeah, I'll forego being there, farming there, and that because I know that works. I can generate income off of that, but that gives me the advantages are I can dedicate more or all time now to this
Mhm.
new farm,
Yeah.
get it up and running, and maybe get it moving faster than you
Yeah.
ever could by doing it part-time?
Yes, and saving my mind and energy and
Just the
brain and body, It's like I thought about, yeah, I could do a 6th season there, and it's kind of I don't wanna call it autopilot, but, I can keep the same crop plan, same customers, like, run it again, but at the end of the day, there wouldn't be enough of me left over. There wouldn't be enough,
yeah.
It would just yeah, and I didn't wanna put myself in that position, and this is definitely a conversation that I've had with my partner. I'm like, "Can we make it without my income for a little bit?" You know? And that's very important conversation, and it's ongoing. It's not easy, but I think for the benefit of balance and even I think it's best. I really do. I think it's
Yeah.
best. And I also have a side business, I think you and I have talked about a little bit maybe, where I am making a little bit of money. I also do, like, body work, so, I'll do a few sessions here and there because that's kind of helping me with a little bit of cash flow. So, it's enough, just enough to get by.
And sometimes that's what you need in these transition periods. Even if it's a little something, it's something coming in is better than nothing coming in and everything going out.
Right, right. It's something coming in and it's like, "Okay, I don't have to save any of that money. That can just go into my checking account, because always in my life it was about, like, "How much are you saving of this?" And everything's like, "Okay, let go of the saving." Like, right now, it's all output and just paying your bills and getting groceries and just living life. You can get back to saving and investing in the future, like, just let this period be like, "This money's coming in because I need to use it," you know?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
switching to a couple technique things because I think you think things through, research stuff. You go to 36-inch wide bed.
Mhm.
The 30-inch bed, obviously the arbitrary standard that a lot of people use. The
Yeah.
advantages of it is a lot of stuff is made to that size.
Right.
Was the idea that if I go to 36, that means less pathways total on the plot, more beds? Y
Yes.
Okay. Did you see any trade-offs to adding that extra 6 inches? Are you losing anything in
Well, I thought of all of that equipment, that people say are standardized. I think of my nets, my shade cloth, my hoops, tools, things like that. I feel like there's enough wiggle room with all of that where, like, if I go to 36, I'm still gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Like, I can push the hoop a little further, I can spread the cloth a little wider. So, I didn't wanna push it much past there because I don't wanna buy all new stuff, but I felt like it was, like, still within, where I could use most of the things that I already have. And I'm not, like, a real diehard on, like, keeping all my beds, like, perfectly 30 inches. Like, I know at my prior farm, some ended up 24 inches and one probably was 40 inches, and I don't care. Like, I don't I am into the numbers and all that, but I never sat down and, like, every single crop, this much profit and all of that. Like, I didn't get that deep into it. It was like I kinda had to pick and choose if you're just one person doing everything.
Right.
I wasn't being so, like, hard sharp on everything, so 36 to me felt like, "I'm gonna push these beds a little wider. I'm still gonna be able to use my stuff. I'll be able to fit in more bed space because it'll be fewer paths," like you said. I'm gonna keep my pathways at 12 inches. And I figure so I'm doing a deep compost, deep mulch system with leaf mulch.
Right, and that's something I wanted to ask you about. What was
Yeah.
the shift? Why
Yeah.
did you choose that?
Yeah. I love this idea of, like, just put it on top of the ground and just start growing. There's just something in that for me that's just like, I mean, we're almost bypassing the soil in a way. That could be there can be pros and cons to that, obviously, but I just love the idea of this, like, clean bed where I know what's on the bed, and just following Ben Hartman for all these years and really asking him, like, "Does this really work for you? Like, this is really working?" And he's very confident about this, and I just yeah, I love the clean lines. That's something else I love about, like, just running a really clean line farm. So you put that compost down, you create your beds, and you just got these clean lines. I also felt like, okay, well, if I create 12-inch beds and 36-inch or sorry, 12-inch pathways and 36-inch beds, and I do that for a season, if I don't like it, well, I mean, reshape the beds. I mean, it's just, it's leaf mulch. You can kinda reshape it, create a different size bed, like, I don't know. Um,
How were you managing before? Just normal style raised beds?
I was trying kind of a mix of raised beds with compost on top of them. So, sort of like a deep mulch system, but I wasn't ever getting to that, like, 5, 6 inches of mulch. I was doing, like, 2 to 3. But what I found is that the compost that I was purchasing, I don't think it was the right type of compost for this deep mulch system. And that's like a larger topic, what compost are you getting? What type of compost are you getting? And will that work for deep mulch? So I was sometimes incorporating the compost into the soil. Sometimes I was leaving it more on the top. It kind of depended on what the crop was. But with the leaf mulch breaking down, I expect it's a much finer product. It doesn't have all these little woods and sticks and things in it. And I'm expecting it to do better. But it
Is
is an
any of this
experiment.
is this
Mhm.
all purely a lean just in that direction from a curiosity standpoint, or do you think you're gonna get some sort of savings out of it labor-wise or else?
I think it's mainly just the lean, clean idea, except I think the saving will be labor and some costs with, like, fewer fertilizers, amendments, things like that, based on what Ben is teaching. So it could save, in buying fewer things to add to the soil, but I really think it's an experiment.
For somebody doing in your previous farming that eighth of an acre by themselves,
Mhm.
what are the keys to having a one-person farm
Mm,
work?
yeah. Lean and clean. Like, I being able to see your whole farm at once was really important to me. Like, I can see all those beds, I had no obstacles, like, and keeping something about being, like, methodical in the way that you weed and the way that you store things, like, keeping things so clean, like, was really helpful for me because I think the, like, cluttered mind leads to a cluttered, like, work space and then vice versa.
Yeah.
So being a one person, like, "I'm gonna do all of this," I needed it to look clean or, like, my brain would be like, "What am I doing?" You know?
Did you have to
Um
build in processes to do that of,
mm,
on this
ye
day, I do weeding and cultivation?
yeah, I think so, I did. I definitely had a lot of that going on. I was a little bit more lenient near the, you know, year 4, 5, but in the beginning, very much, like, on Monday I do this, and it was usually my farm walk, text my chefs, weed, decide what I need to do for the week. Yes, very much streamlining in processes. Very, very important. Second importance for me was the utilization of volunteers and really screening those volunteers to make sure that they were workers, like people that really wanted to be there and learn and that wanted to jump in and do the work. It didn't matter if it was raining, too hot, whatever it was, like they wanted to work because I found if I had volunteers that were just there to put it on Instagram, like it just it got in the way. And I like it was hard to say kind of decide maybe this person isn't going to work, but like I'm trying to run like a really tight ship here with volunteers, so you have to be pretty picky. Um
what's the volunteer labor? I'm trying to think of the right word here. Not schedule, but what would you have them do? How often were they
Right.
on the farm? That
Yeah, good
type of
question.
thing.
I tried to have 1 to 2 volunteers that would come 1 to 2 times a week to help me in the field. So they would be weeding, helping me lay down landscape fabrics, planting, transplanting usually, putting lettuces in the ground. So those kind of methodical things that they could learn and continue to do each time. So 1 to 2 people a week for half a day, let's say. And then I would have 1 big harvest day a week. So most all of the harvesting would get done 1 whole morning and the washing and processing and all of that, and that's a day-long process, and I would have a good 4, 5 volunteers. Like, it's like a solid crew for the season, and these people are committing up front to try to make it through the season with me. Now some people wouldn't, and I'd have to find fill-ins, but, like, I try to have a good 4 or 5 people. They come every single Wednesday for the season.
Seems hard. What's the ask and what are they doing it for? What do they want to get out of it?
Well, it began, my first season was 2020, the height of like, right at the beginning of COVID.
COVID, yeah, okay.
So that really, like, people wanted out of their house and they wanted to be in nature and they wanted to do something. So that started the whole volunteer chain for me. I'm sure I thought that I was gonna need volunteers, but I probably in the beginning, I wasn't too sure what I needed, and I started to have people reach out and say, "Can I come help you?" And that year really formulated this whole it created my formula. It's like, I need this much help each week, and each year I'm gonna look for a new set of people. And I'd have some that would bleed over year to year, but that would kinda help with the foundation. But then each year I was kinda growing with a new set. And, people posting it on Facebook and Instagram that they were helping and their beautiful pictures and all that really did help because then a new round of people would reach out the next season. And that was integral to me.
Do you think you could do this alone, purely alone, no
Mhm.
volunteers?
On the same size property?
Let's say the quarter acre you were farming, because this is an unknown. Well, the eighth of an acre under production that you had.
Mm,
What's the part that makes you question it? Is it harvest day? Where's the break in the system where, yes, one person could do these things, but here's where it would get sketchy for one person. Where are the sketchy parts for one
yeah.
person?
I think I could handle all of the field work on my own, meaning the planting, the weeding, the landscape fabrics, the tomato, clips. Like, I think I could handle all of that. Each year I got more and more skilled and needed fewer and fewer people to come help me. The harvest day would be, I think, the hookup for me, but that comes with a caveat. So, because I was renting a plot on a larger farm, I was needing to work around their schedule for the harvest for the processing room and the refrigeration unit. So, I was kind of shoving the entire harvest for the week into one day, meaning we're getting there at 5:30, 6 in the morning to cut those summer greens, and we've got 4 to 5 people out there, and we're harvesting everything that we need for the week to sell, bringing it in, washing everything, and getting it in the cooler. It's a very long process, and it took 4 or 5 pretty skilled people to do it. That part would be hard for me to do on my own in that fashion. Now, fast forward to the farm that I'm building now. I'm going to gain so much time living on my property. This driving back and forth that I used to do and all the planning and, like, I will greatly be increasing my work hour opportunity by just living right inside. I can just go right outside, you know? So I think, like, maybe I could do it on my own now. Maybe. Because I can harvest whenever I want to now. I'm not working around somebody else being in the harvest room, and I can't use the processing room, and I can go out and harvest a few things here. I will the entire refrigeration unit is mine. I can use it whenever I want to. Like, there's just a lot of things that I was pushing all into this very compact day and time, and I needed help to make it work that way. I don't know that I'll need as much help now, but I would still like to have a couple of volunteers. Also for the community, just
Sure,
having
yeah.
people around, like, I'm gonna be working by myself now, where I was on another farm where there were a lot of people, and so it was a great community. And so I'd like to have people around. I don't wanna be just solo farming all the time.
What was the last farm in terms of total beds, and what are the bed lengths?
So I had 32 50-foot beds.
Okay, so for perspective, so 32 50-foot beds, you think you could farm that on your own, assuming we remove all the little kinks of shared
Yeah.
space and all
Yeah.
that type of thing.
Yes, I think so. I think I could. Now, could I do it with as much work-life balance? Probably not. Would I be as, like, easygoing about my farming? Probably not. So those volunteers are really important to me having a life also outside of farming.
'Cause when you were rolling on that other farm in season, so let's not count getting started in the spring or winding up in the fall, the meat of the season.
Mhm,
How many beds would you be either seeding or transplanting into a week?
mhm,
In their bag, I guess, how many beds are you taking out a week out of those 32?
mhm. I was planting anywhere from 3 to 7 beds a week, and that's between direct seeding and transplanting.
Okay, so that part I think is relatively easy. It's harvesting those 7 that would be the
Yeah.
real, and
Mhm.
doing everything that comes,
For washing, yeah, all the
putting it in the
greens.
container, yeah, all that stuff.
Right, right. And also, I harvest all of my cut greens with a knife. I don't use the greens harvester, so that does really slow us down, but I don't like the greens harvester, I wish I did. But I'm just bringing that up because it does take me, quite a while to cut greens because I'm not using the harvester.
I've heard that from a few farmers. Is that
Yeah,
because you like to QC it as you cut, and you
yes,
can just measure the growth of look at the growth and
yes,
cut where you should given how the plant is
yes,
versus you have just more control, more precision. It's like trying to get a
yes.
filling with a dental drill versus I'm gonna try and go in there with a screwdriver and chip
Yeah.
away.
Yeah, like, I wanna see what am I giving to people? Like, if there's, like, I mean, the greens are beautiful, but there's always gonna be areas that you might not want in your harvest bin. So I'd rather do that in the beginning rather than volunteers having to pick through it later or something.
Right.
So I'd like to QC it while I go. I also found it just really hurt my body, and then also, yeah, just the heights were all different, and so, I know a lot of farms just do 1 cut and they're done. But I mean, depending on the greens and the time of the year, like some beds I'm getting 3 cuts off of, and if I didn't cut it really nice the first week, then, like, the next weeks to come was hell trying to get nice cuts. So, I just learned that in the first few years, and I would go back and try the greens harvester again, and I would always say to my volunteer working that day, "Don't let me do that again." But I still have hope, like, I'm, like, hoping maybe someday I'll figure out how that works, and again, I guess if you just want 1 cut, it's fine, you know?
Context. It's
Yeah.
great in some situations, it's not great in others. The good thing, it's not super expensive if you do wanna toy around with it.
Right,
It's not
right.
thousands and thousands of
Yeah,
dollars.
yeah,
Yeah, so that's you had 16 of those bed feet, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Where's the one person limit? And it
yeah.
sounds like it's from your perspective, it's somewhere in this area.
I think
You
so.
coulda and you were making decent money off this, so this is one person. Like,
Mhm.
could you in St. Louis, I don't know what the cost of living and stuff in there, but say you were single, you had to live alone. Could you have lived alone off the income off that farm for the amount of time you farmed per year on 1/8 of an acre there?
Yes, I could have, but it would be I mean, I think this type of farming obviously takes a very specific type of person. I mean
Yeah, you're not living
yeah.
some extravagant lifestyle.
Right, not extravagant lifestyle, and also just to run a really clean, managed farm, like, really lean and clean and, like, not a lot of fluff and you
What's
like
the fluff that you see people doing that you wouldn't have on your farm? How do you
I think
defluff?
just, like, overbuying, like, tools and equipment and things, just, like, like, just yeah, tools and equipment,
Because you have
not
to be
me
really intentional, right? If I only have this much labor,
Mhm,
I think a lot like, it's some sort of blend of how Ben thinks and just I would say thing.
mhm,
You have X units of labor hours a week, so you
mhm,
have to really focus on, "I can do this,
mhm,
or I can do B." A or
right,
B, and if A is gonna get me the most in there provide equal product, but A is more efficient given my time use and doesn't beat me up too bad bodily wise,
yeah,
then I go with A, and there's no need
mhm,
to take on extra stuff. So have you been very intentional throughout the years of just whittling down,
mhm,
here are the things that really matter and make a difference, and here's the
yeah.
stuff I'm just not gonna look at anymore?
I think so, and, like, to even say what that is now, I don't know, because you keep making it more efficient, and then I let go of whatever wasn't like, wasn't adding to the system or wasn't, like, right for the system. I mean, even when it comes down to, like I mean, a huge one I can talk about is, like, the way that I used to flip my beds changed so much, where now I feel like I'm, like, not even working some of the time because it's so easy, whereas before I had a whole different way, and it was so much labor.
Well, what did that involve?
Well, so before, like, let's say it's like cut greens. So let's say it's arugula, and I need to plant something in that same bed in 10 days, right? So I would go out and either use the greens harvester, a weed whacker, or a hedge trimmer, and I would go out and get that as close as I could to the ground, right? Like that old crop. I'm going to cut it as close as I can to the ground, which took a lot like of labor like on my back. So cut it as close as I can to the ground. Then go get compost and spread that all over the arugula. Then spray a bunch of water on it and then cover it with the tarp and put sandbags on it. The hardest part about that was clearing all of that debris off of the bed and carrying it to the compost pile. Okay. So that was like a lot of labor. Now, I now I don't cut it to the ground. I just sometimes put a little bit of compost on it, sometimes not. I just throw a black tarp over it for a week or whatever and pull it up, and it's just like crispy greens. You just kinda break them, do that and they fall off the bed and then you start planting. So I was going through that really challenging, laborious process, which was taking up a couple of days of my week. Because if there were like 5 beds I needed to do that to, moving it all to the compost pile, I'm carrying all these old greens up there. It's a lot of pounds, and I was wearing myself out. And then Ray Tyler was like, "Well, I'm just doing this now." And I was like, "Oh." And I tried that and I was like, "Oh, well, wow, that changed my entire year because I got like 2 days back, you know?
I
So
think
I
that's
don't
one of the
know.
best things we can do as a business owner is re-audit our thinking and processes.
Yeah.
I had people doing something for me, and then I had to do it recently, and they were doing it the way I told them, and then I was started to do it the way I had told them to do it, and I was like, "Oh my god, why did I do this? This makes no sense.
Yeah.
There's a much easier, faster way," and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Guys, next time, just tell me, like, this is stupid. It
Right.
doesn't
Yeah.
work like this. We could save a lot of time and effort by going this way,
Yeah.
and until you try it and think about other ways."
Yeah.
But this is the one danger I think around it's probably any business, but a lot of people in this have some sort of love interest around a methodology or a philosophy of around nature or soil or farming, and it's like, "Well, I just wanna do it that way,"
Yeah.
instead of really thinking, "What labor do I have available? What problem am I trying to solve? What's the
Oh,
goal of committing to this
right,
method?
right,
Because after all, it's a business. It's one thing if you're a garden and you're just toying around, but if we're going for this solo farm,
right,
you
right.
can't have the fat. Like you said, you gotta
No,
clean it down, lean
yeah,
it down, and get rid of all that stuff, and those
mhm.
little changes make a big difference money-wise, time-wise, energy-wise. I think
That
it
wa Yeah, that was huge for me. I'll tell you that changed my entire operation because it was bogging me down. I was having to find really strong volunteers to come and help me lift these big totes of greens to carry them up to this compost bin, and I was, like, starting to really be concerned about those days that I needed to do that. And just this very simple change, like, okay, take out these 2 steps, put the fabric on there instead and wait until they're, like, totally crispy, like, then I don't have to carry anything. It totally freed up so much time. But we don't know until we know. Like, I mean, I would research and listen to all my mentors and try to follow what people do, and, like, until something really clicks, you're I was trying other methods that I thought would work, and I couldn't think of anything better, and it's just year after year becoming more efficient. So when we're talking about solo farming, yeah, I don't know, those first couple years, it might be really hard, because you haven't dialed in your systems. You haven't figured out what works for you. And I think it's always just great to have somebody else to like, throw these ideas around to. I had that community at the farm. They already have all these farmers there. So I would go and say, and I try not to bother him much, but hey, what do you think about this? And all of that information really helped me. So I think like when I think of a solo farmer starting their first year on a property, if there's no one else there and they don't have a community, they don't have other farmers, they don't have great mentors, like I think that could be kind of tough, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, and I
Yeah.
think there's a beauty and an efficiency in strategic laziness, like, what's the least amount of work I can do to get this thing done?
Right.
So going to a deep mulch
Uh-huh,
system like you have now,
uh-huh.
that how will that change how you turn beds at all now? Like, I'm
I
not
think
and that's similar?
it'll be very similar. Yeah, because, like, if I'm growing some cut greens and the next week I wanna plant carrots, I'll just throw that tarp over those cut greens, rake the top of the bed, and then plant the carrots.
What's the anticipated work to maintain that deep
Mhm.
mulch? Is that a once a year application of a deep mulch, and then you let it break down the rest of the year and just refresh, like, in the fall, give it winter to
Yeah.
do its
I
thing?
think, it's gonna be variable, but talking to Ben about this, and I know I keep bringing him up, but he's kind of the one I'm conversating, about this with and kind of following is that about every 2 years, he adds an inch on top. So it might not even be every year, especially in the beginning this first year. I mean, I have a good 6 inches of fresh leaf compost on the entire plot. So, maybe in a year or 2 years, I'll need to bring in another inch and put that on top, which in doing that in the winter allows you to be able to walk, like, because things are frozen, you can bring implements in there or a small tractor, however you wanna do it, and just go right in and not worry about compaction and stuff in the winter. I'll just probably do it all by hand, but so I'll have to get a load maybe in 2 winters, and that'll be a winter project.
Is there anything else you don't do that you see other farmers do? Not to say that they're doing it wrong, but you just
Mm.
haven't found the need to do it?
Mm. Good question. I guess the big one is the greenhouse decision. Managing an outdoor greenhouse with temperature control and all the things for your starts, and because my business is so small and a lot of the plants that I grow are direct seeded, I feel like I don't need to go through the labor and expense of building a greenhouse. I'm gonna try to make it work just inside in a small grow room. So I think that's a pretty big difference. And I'll see if that's enough for me.
Used landscape fabric on the old farm. That I'm assuming is to quell weed pressure with this deeper system,
Mhm.
no tillage. Are you gonna need to use it?
I think I'll still use it definitely for longer crops, crops that are in the ground a while, like kale and tomatoes.
You should get the benefit if you have a low water situation, you are getting that physical barrier to help slow
Right.
transpiration.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna play around with it with head lettuce and do some experiments, like, side by side, a bed with it and a bed without. Because I mean, you just don't know until you try. I tried to do some beds at my previous farm without it, and the lettuce quality was half of what it was with the fabric. Not these big, beautiful heads. They were wimpy and, like, some of them would get, like, yeah, it looked like little disease and whatever, so I really found that that fabric had a lot of benefits. So I'm bringing it all over to the new place, and I'll be experimenting. I mean, that's the great thing about the first year is, like, I mean, you think you know, but, like, you don't know until you try, and so I'll be doing a lot of little experiments, and it's very exciting. Yeah.
There any other crops you found to be too management intensive at your
Mm,
scale?
mm.
I know you do tomatoes, they're one, but I don't know, cucumber.
I I like the tomatoes, but I just haven't really dialed them in enough to get the quantity that I feel like I need for the labor that I'm putting into it, and I only do cherry tomatoes. I don't do any of the larger tomatoes, only cherries. I'm gonna try them again now that I have the caterpillar tunnel and see if that helps, having more protection. So I haven't dialed it in. I'd love to kinda drop them, but I know customers just love those in the summer with their salad, so I'm gonna keep trying to dial that in. Um, Other labor intensive ones, I tried leeks this year. I wouldn't say they're so labor intensive, it's just they sit in the ground for a really long time, so I had to do some interplanting with those so I didn't lose the bed cash. Labor intensive. No, not really.
Okay.
No. Maybe beets. I play around with beets and how I do those each year. The transplanting of beets, like, I know people say that it'll grow the perfect beet and you can control, like, obviously putting the healthiest plants in the ground and all that. I found that direct seeding beets, like, I always got more beautiful beets doing it that way, so I'm gonna switch back. So I kinda go back and forth on beets. Starting them all in trays is just a lot of labor and planting them, whereas if I can just run the seeder through and get a good crop of beets, I'm just gonna do it that way.
Way faster.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, love the philosophy behind how you farm and what you're doing. For people that are following along and wanna learn more about your story, where can they go?
Yeah, Loving Roots Urban Farm. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and I have a fairly new website that I'm proud of, and I'm keeping the name Loving Roots Urban Farm because although we moved, we're still somewhat urban here, and I wanna keep my branding, so that's where you can find me.